Did you see Concussion with Will Smith? I didn't either. I was hoping you did because I thought it might be thematically appropriate for this episode. So if you've seen it, if you could just call or text. For those of you who haven't seen it, Concussion is a movie about a lawsuit surrounding the National Football League in the United States. It's about American football, a sport where people smash into each other a lot, and there was a doctor who got to thinking that maybe all of that smashing into people actually hurt people's brains. So, wait, it doesn't have a helmet. It has a helmet. And so he did this research, and he figured out that when humans do this to each other, it's actually incredibly damaging to your brain. Clearly that would hurt. It hurt your ears just to listen to it. And so, therefore, it would take a really dishonest person to look at that situation and say, I just don't see how anybody could possibly get hurt doing that. But that was the position of the NFL. And so there's this great scene in the middle of an otherwise mediocre movie where Will Smith is confronting Alec Baldwin, and Alec Baldwin is the suit guy, the lawyer. You have no idea what you're messing with here, son. And Will Smith is like, tell the truth, and it's the most intense, passionate, awesome thing in the whole show. It really got my heart beating because I have been there so many times to that place where you're just deeply frustrated that one side is stubbornly and willfully ignoring what is real and true for their own advantage, and they don't care how much damage they're going to do. They're going to stick to their story. It's nauseating, and I love seeing Will Smith just call the thing out for what it is. In Acts, we've been dealing with this stuff chapter in and chapter out. Truth has been pitched out the window. The opponents of Paul and Christianity are trying to keep their ship of desperation and control afloat, and now to the point where they'll do whatever they need to do to make it happen. And so in this sequence, in the second half of Acts chapter 23, we're going to see them stoop to an even lower level of dishonesty and be met with an attempt to bring this whole thing into the light so it can be sorted out with integrity. I think this is a really fun passage with really interesting implications. Matt is the 10-minute Bible Hour. Let's do this thing. The middle part of the book of Acts has been all about Paul going on these big giant missionary journeys all over the place. They've gone really well. The message of Jesus has particularly resonated with poor people and non-Jewish people. That's interesting because it causes a friction with the Jewish people who are like, no, this God is for us and you're perverting it with this weird Christian version. It's gotten violent at several turns. Well, Paul feels like he needs to go back to Jerusalem, the headquarters of Judaism, and see if he can take another run at making this thing make sense to his opponents. His opponents are very violent, and so a lot of people warn him not to go, but he goes anyway, he gives it a shot. It does not go well. He almost gets ripped apart trying to communicate the thing, and he finds himself in prison as we pick it up in Acts 23, verse 11. And that night, the text says that the Lord himself showed up and stood next to Paul in prison. And as this happens, the reader is likely to expect another prison rescue because we've seen it like 4 times in Acts. Like chains falling off, doors flinging open, guards falling asleep. Crazy stuff has happened when the torchbearers of the gospel find themselves in these situations. So it'd be natural to expect that we're in line for a 5th. Like probably the prison's going to blow up or fall apart or crumble or who knows what. But instead, this time, it's just a word of encouragement. And it says that the Lord said, "Take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome." No miracle, and I guess God showing up is a miracle, but no tangible miracle. So how's this going to work out? Because it seems like Paul is in a spot that's unsolvable with a ton of people who still seem very, very vested in killing him. Back to that in a minute. So the next morning in verse 12, it says, the Jews formed a conspiracy and they bound themselves with this oath. They said, we're not going to sleep or eat or do anything until Paul is dead. And so they cook up this conspiracy plan that actually sounds a lot like the conspiracy plan to kill Julius Caesar in 44 BC, about 100 years and change before this happened. The original audience definitely would have caught those similarities, and they might have even felt a bit of a sense of fate, like, we've seen this before. We know how this kind of thing plays out. We're going to invite Paul to something on false pretenses, and then, we'll just stab him 60 or 80 times until he's dead from being stabbed, and then we can be done with this whole thing. But what is so gross is these guys bind themselves. These are religious Jewish leadership people. They bind themselves with an oath before God to violate 2 commandments of God, the lesser of which is don't bear false witness, but they've just made an oath before God to lie. And the second of which is a little bit bigger. It's don't kill people. And they just made an oath to stinking murder somebody in front of everybody. Why would God like this oath? This is a picture of how broken the whole religious scene had become in Israel by the time we get to this point in the mid-1st century. And I need to do another video where I bring us all the way up to how this train wreck happened. But long story short, the Jewish people won their independence about 150 years before the time of Jesus, and it looked like things were going to get better, but they didn't get better. They functioned just like any other kingdom, with murders and creepy, awful bribes and terrible things happening. And eventually the Romans got sick of their nonsense and came in and were like, now that guy's going to be king. You people are done. And they deposed the Jews, and it deteriorated into this stupid political power fest where they were all scrambling and begging for the scraps from the Romans' tables to get their power and keep their little thing. And it just spiraled into dishonesty. And we see it on display here that it has come all the way full circle from a place where this was God's chosen people who kept God's commands and were trying to get things right, to a place where they have such a twisted view of what it would look like to obey God that this seems like a good idea. Well, some kid hears about the thing and tugs on the commander's jacket and says, we need to inform Paul about this stuff. And Paul finds out about the thing. The commander finds out about the thing. The gigantic lie manipulation game is exposed, and the commander sends the kid away, and he puts together this gigantic detachment of soldiers that includes 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight, provide mounts for Paul so that he may be taken safely to Governor Felix. The commander is like, I am not getting in the middle of some big, giant, crazy, insane religious riot. This has gone to Stupidville. And the fact that he put that many guys on this detail gives you a clear indication of how seriously he viewed this threat. He understood what the political and religious climate was at this moment. But the biggest thing about this that eats at me is the lying. I mean, they didn't kill him. It's attempted murder, so I guess we give him a little bit of a pass on that. But just to so willfully get to a point where the truth is irrelevant. I'm so sure I'm right. I'm so sure that my view for the greater good and how the world ought to be is correct, that I'll just lie about reality. I will lie to myself. I will lie to others. I will stubbornly make this face and say that's my story and I'm sticking to it and not budge on any of these things. It's gross and it's disappointing. And you know why else it's disappointing? Is because I have been there and I have done that myself. And when you hold up a mirror to yourself and you get a look at some of the ugly decisions that you've made in your life by seeing those ugly decisions in other people's lives, it stings a little bit. Well, the story rounds out with Paul getting where he's supposed to go. This letter gets delivered, sent on behalf of Claudius Lysias. He's the Roman commander, to Governor Felix. We'll talk more about him in the next episode. And so all these soldiers did exactly what they were supposed to do, and they arrive in Caesarea, which is a port town up north. I made a video about that. I'll link it at the end of this whole thing so you can see it if you want to be reminded of what that's about. And now Paul is in a new setting. Things have been escalated up one notch, and when we get into chapter 24 next time around, we're going to see what it looks like for Paul to make his case before the governor of the entire Roman province. And what's interesting about that is that through this weird assassination attempt and the lying and the deception, Luke is giving us a picture of God's providence once again. That God is advancing his story, and still, even though he didn't do anything miraculous here, he's still getting things done to protect his guy and get this message to where it's supposed to go. You remember all the way back in Acts 1:8, Jesus is still there and he tells the disciples, you'll be my witnesses, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And as we go through the book of Acts, it becomes more clear that that ends of the earth is in reference to Rome, the big city out west that influences everything. Well, what becomes clear from this passage is that Paul's character arc is not finished. His role in the narrative isn't done So he just can't be dead yet because he needs to go to Rome. He's the baton carrier and he has that job. But it's also pretty cool that whereas almost every other time we've seen those big hurdles overcome through miraculous means, this time we see it overcome simply by the right behavior of another believer. And as the Bible goes along, and I think as Christian history has gone along, we've seen this more and more. Early on, God did the heavy lifting with obviously the Jesus thing, and then with the Holy Spirit and tons of miracles and the day of Pentecost and breaking down walls and raising people from the dead. But the burden seems to shift the further into history we get, as the expectation on God's part seems to be more that, well, Christians can read stuff like this, or become mature in their faith, and they do more of the heavy lifting by simply doing what they ought to do as Christians. And so in this case, it's just some kid doing what he ought to do that ultimately provides deliverance for Paul and moves the ball forward to the next place we need to get to. I'm really tempted to jump on the soapbox here and go on a big spiel about the importance of integrity and telling the truth. It's kind of hard to do because there's some hypocrisy involved that makes me want to pull back on those reins a little bit. But the bottom line is, look, obviously the main point of this passage is to advance the narrative. But the more subtle point is the contrast between Paul being rewarded for telling the truth in very difficult circumstances and a bunch of other people looking like total chumps for completely lying at multiple levels and forfeiting their integrity. And if what we're talking about here is true and right, we shouldn't need to kill anybody to make it happen, and we shouldn't need to lie to anybody to make it happen. Either a thing is real or it's not. It doesn't matter what anybody says or does. And I feel like on a secondary level, a passage like this is a good reminder of that truth. Hey, just a couple of things on the way out the door. One, thank you so much for watching this and being a part of it. Some of you who are watching, I've known now for 2.5 years through this channel. This is a massive project. There were 80 some videos in, and that's a lot of work on your part too. So thank you very much for watching this and supporting me and encouraging me and being a part. I think it's cool that we've been able to do this together. Second thing is thank you also for being patient with me while I've had some travel and stuff. I was in Rome with some friends over the last couple of weeks. I took my camera gear with me and I made 7 videos while I was there that I'm really excited about. They're not edited up yet. I have some work to do, but I'm going to finish up the stuff on Acts, and then all of that material from Rome I think will fit really neatly sequentially at the end of this big series. So I'll be chipping away at it, but I'm going to put a lot of work over the next few weeks into finishing out the Acts series, and then we'll get into the Rome stuff after, and I think we'll have fun with that too. Also, hopefully you've subscribed by now. If you haven't, I'd be very honored if you'd consider doing that. If you have subscribed, YouTube changed some stuff about the notifications. So if you look on your mobile, you might see there's a little bell icon down there. I think you have to toggle that one way or another in order to receive notifications when I post stuff. So I want you to see these upcoming videos. Make sure to check on that so that you get the notifications and get a look at them when it happens. I'm going to be quiet now. This was fun. Thank you. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour. We'll see you soon.